These lunches are for those who support us. I financed the car for my brother, my dad remarked, raising a glass to him. Let's not act. The following day, I nodded, set down my drink, and drove home. Their mortgage payment bounced, the credit card was canceled, and the watch warranty was terminated. The number of missed calls on my phone skyrocketed. I sent a text message. I was enraged. As I sat at that table, I pondered why I continue to be there for folks who only remember me when they are in need. I knew they didn't even want me there, which was the hardest part. It was my brother's meal. He had recently been hired for a marketing position. Not really noteworthy, except the behavior of my parents. It would seem that he had cured cancer. My mother reserved a table at Camp Pinellas, one of those establishments with dim lighting and a leather-bound wine list. A few days prior, she sent it in a text message. On Friday, we're having supper for Ryan. If you'd want, you can come. She wasn't sure if I would fit in at the community function. I arrived on the schedule. I did, of course. I always did. No one appeared to notice, though. I could see my mother fiddling with the wine menu. Ryan and my dad were giggling at something concerning his new manager in the middle of the story. Next to my dad, across from Ryan, was the lone available seat. I took a seat and poured a drink for myself. I waited for someone to recognize me and brought one of the better ones, something I knew they wouldn't buy for themselves. They didn't. Ryan's new vehicle, new job, and new condo, all of which I had helped make possible, remained the main topic of conversation. Of course, no one brought that up. Nobody mentioned how Ryan phoned me 5 months earlier, pleading for assistance with the down payment and stating that he required a co-signer for the auto loan, how his credit alone was insufficient. He said he would reimburse me, said it was only to get him going. And me, I desired to join the family. I want to be required. I said, yes. They shared anecdotes about Ryan's grind, laughed, and toasted. I remained silent, nodding like some distant relative who hardly made the guest list while munching on expensive calamari. Then my father got up. This, he murmured, lifting his glass to face Ryan. Meals for those who support us. A pause occurred. Let's not pretend, he continued with a smile. I didn't recoil. I said nothing at all. I simply glanced at my brother, then at him, and finally at my drink. No one corrected him. Not a single word was spoken. I informed them I had work in the morning after setting down my drink and getting up. No embraces, no farewells. Without turning on the radio, I went out, got into my car, and drove home. I launched and closed the credit card app the next morning. Every week, their shared card closed. I canceled the service I had paid for and proceeded to the warranty website for my dad's watch. I then stopped the monthly mortgage payment that was being deducted from my account by logging into the bank site. Technically, I was the owner of the house. My risk, my credit. They were aware of it. They just didn't discuss it. The calls began in the middle of the morning. My mother gave me 3. Voicemails in a panic, wondering if something was amiss. My dad gave me 2. Just one text. The mortgage payment was unsuccessful. Is this an error? Ryan was the first to get into a panic. Hello, my friend. Are you okay? 4 calls were then missed. Then a sad emoji and a snapshot of his bank balance. I didn't respond. I texted each of them the same thing. Let's not act as though I believed that quiet would be sufficient. I hoped that they would sit down and consider what they said and didn't say and come to terms with the consequences. That a family member would make contact as if they truly meant it. However, I was mistaken. They didn't stop. They went into a panic. The following morning was when it began. Ryan sent me a series of texts before I had even finished making coffee. I'm not sorry, simply bewilderment such as, hey, what's up with the card? Did you accidentally cancel it? As though this was all a random malfunction. I paid him no attention. He appeared outside my flat 10 minutes later. He did not knock immediately. I peered through the slats at him. After pacing for a while and checking his phone, he eventually gave a little knock. He didn't want to wake up his neighbor, for example. I didn't respond. He knocked once again and stood there sending a message. Man, hurry up. Avoid making this strange. We're brothers. My heart was racing as I stood still, not out of guilt, but out of self-control, because I wouldn't be at peace if I opened the door. I no longer knew him as peace. So I waited. Eventually, he departed. And 20 minutes later, he was grinning and sipping a coffee while posting on Instagram from a hip cafe as if nothing had occurred. The vehicle I paid for was parked directly outside behind him in the picture, with the same jacket I got him for Christmas last year, zipped halfway up. Next was my mother's turn. She contacted me 3 times in an hour, leaving voicemails each time I didn't respond. After hearing the first tens, I switched it off. Not with remorse, but with the same patronizing concern, her voice broke. When I was excessively emotional as a child, she would always act as though I was having a tantrum. I received a lengthy text a few hours later. She said that I must have misheard the toast since I had taken things too personally. She said that I was always overly sensitive and that it was only a joke. Then she delivered the phrase that caused my jaw to tighten. "You have always had the support of our family. Don't let one supper ruin that. One meal." To them, it was just that. Just a small mistake. That was not what they wanted to see. It has nothing to do with the toast. It concerned all that came before it. Years of being accepted rather than valued. Years of not being loved, but being helpful. I retrieved the vehicle loan paperwork from my desk. Everything, my money, my credit, and my risk was in my name. Without me, he would not have been able to get it. When I gave him the forms, he hardly even looked at them. All he said was, "Thanks, bro." I took it seriously and began researching rims. Then my dad sent me an email. Subject: "Let's make everything plain. No greeting, no warmth." He had always taught us to keep money and emotions apart, and perhaps I had become too attached according to a chilly paragraph. He claimed that I was acting in a domineering manner and upsetting the family. He even suggested that I reconsider my perspective on loyalty. That one struck me differently because it was so far away, not because it was harsh, as if I were an outside danger rather than his son. That night, I got a fraud notice on the joint credit account I had shut down. It had been attempted to be accessed by someone, most likely one of them. I looked over the logs. It was from my parents' zip code. Additionally, I received a call from the watch warranty company informing me that someone attempted to reactivate the coverage by posing as me. The account was flagged. My name was locked. The account has been sealed on the third day. They were out of moves. I noticed the mortgage payment fail again this time with a failed transaction attempt from an old checking account I had once added them to for emergencies. They were grasping now. Then came the message from Ryan. "No greeting, no apology, just this. You're blowing this up for no reason. I didn't ask you to do all that. You offered." Like none of it mattered. Like he hadn't begged for help on the phone 6 months ago crying because he couldn't keep taking the bus to interviews. Like I hadn't told him I'd take care of it. And he hadn't said, "You saved my life, man." It was gone. All of it erased the moment I stopped being useful. That night, I logged into the vehicle account, called the bank, and scheduled a repossession. I wasn't making a point anymore. I was taking back what was mine. The truck came at 6:47 a.m. I watched it pull up from my car down the block. I wasn't going to miss this part. I needed to see it. Not out of spite, but clarity. Proof that I wasn't just imagining all those years I gave and got nothing in return. Right there in their driveway was Ryan's vehicle. As usual. As if the driveway were his own showroom, he always parked there. His Instagram handle and the personalized plate were still on it. I also paid for that. The repo guy completed it quickly. No warning, no knock. In less than 90, I hooked it. Ryan must have been asleep. It was not until the back wheels were off the ground that he appeared. Wearing gym shorts and socks, he ran outside while shouting something I couldn't hear. After giving him a piece of paper, the driver returned to the truck. It was thrown on the grass by Ryan. Before the truck had even left, he was on his phone. "Most likely you'll call me." I didn't respond. The texts resumed that afternoon. He wasn't upset, not initially. He immediately went for guilt. Told me that I made him feel ashamed. Claimed he had to justify his bus ride because he had a date that evening. Told me that when neighbors saw the truck, they inquired. I gave him permission to text. Then my mother called once more. This time, she left a voicemail. She didn't inquire about my well-being. She didn't say sorry. "Robert, whatever point you're trying to make, you've made it," she said. "Enough is enough. sufficient for whom I looked through old financial documents for the remainder of that day. I wanted to remember how much I had accomplished, not because I had to. Everything that they'd conveniently overlooked. I located the lease that I co-signed for Ryan in 2019. He never paid the fine because he had broken it early. I talked about it. When the refrigerator broke down, I located the $900 I sent my mom the same refrigerator they told their neighbors Ryan had purchased. I discovered bank emails demonstrating how I negotiated a reduced interest rate for their mortgage, and then had it transferred to my name, allowing them to refinance without facing another rejection. I texted them all at once that night. Let's get together. Tomorrow, everyone. My location, 6 p.m. They agreed with me, which surprised me. They probably believed I was going to reverse everything. Let's say it went too far. I'm sorry for the drama. Offer more money, perhaps. That's what I did before. They arrived together the next day. My father did not sit. As if we were having tea, my mom brought some store-bought pastries. Ryan appeared worn out. He said, "I need the car back, man, right away." I put a folder on the coffee table and held it up. Everything was inside. Loan documents, transfer receipts, bank statements. I gave them a moment to think about that. I then declared it to be over. No more payments, no more cards, no more favors. Ryan laughed. Not a real laugh, more like disbelief. My mom asked me what they were supposed to do. My dad said, "You're really going to turn your back on your own family over a toast?" I said nothing. I opened the door and waited. They left one by one, not saying much. My mom lingered a little, but I didn't look at her. She walked out that night. I blocked all three of them, and I slept better than I had in years. 3 days passed. No texts, no calls, not a single knock on my door. I figured maybe they were letting it sink in, maybe trying to process the fact that I wasn't going to come running this time, but deep down, I knew better. My family never reflected. They just retaliated. On Friday morning, I got a notification from the credit monitoring app. One used new inquiry detected. Then another. I stared at the screen as I opened the app. My name, address, and social security number were used by someone to apply for 2 credit cards. They had no intention of concealing it. I was already aware of its origin. I printed everything for my parents and assisted them with tax filing a few years ago. Full copies of SSN W-2s. All of it was labeled and arranged like a library in a cabinet in the hallway. I thought it was secure. Now that presumption was gone. I reported the fraud. My credit was frozen. I changed all of my previous passwords, all accounts, each backup email. They began the actual performance at noon. Ryan's lengthy, passive-aggressive Facebook status was filled with ambiguous accusations and dramatic pauses. It was about deceptive generosity and how some people use money to manipulate and control others while pretending to be helpful. No names. Enough information to allow everyone to fill in the blanks. Family, he wrote, is about love, not debt. Commenting began. Old relatives, companions, distant relatives. The post is liked by some of them. Others DM'd me to inquire about what transpired. I didn't respond. Not a single version of the truth was acceptable to them. When I got home that evening, I noticed something on my doormat. I have extra house keys. Years ago, I gave my mother those. They were concealed beneath a bakery receipt in a Ziploc bag. Not even a note was written by her. Just her name printed on the top of the receipt. For a long time, I stood there looking at it. It seemed to be a farewell gesture. Not a farewell. It's more of a warning. I received a call from my landlord the following day. He sounded perplexed. In an attempt to update the lease and transfer payment responsibility, someone posing as me called the office. The caller ended the call when they requested confirmation. The attempt was reported as suspicious by my landlord. It was obvious to me that it was either my brother or my father. I drove by the house because they were beginning to show signs of desperation. I stayed inside. I didn't knock. I simply watched from my parking space down the street. They had not mowed their lawn. The mailbox was full. There were no cars in the driveway anymore, and Ryan's bike had vanished from the side gate. It appeared as though the house was holding its breath. Then Ryan returned on Saturday night. He didn't arrive by himself this time. He brought his former partner. I recalled her. Alyssa. She appeared uneasy, remained silent. He spoke all the time, pacing my porch, as if he were practicing a move. The day after the car was repossessed, he claimed to have lost his job, stated that he was attempting to obtain a new one, but buses weren't working, and the interviews were all out of town. Claimed that although Alyssa had been assisting him, it wasn't enough. He gave me the impression that we were on the same page. The car will only be needed for a few weeks. Rob, I'll retrieve it. I'll even make a payment. I didn't answer. He then said something that made me stop dead in my tracks. Mom is discussing selling the house. I gave him a look. She's not sleeping. Dad is currently on medication. They're dying from this whole thing. That should convince me, he reasoned. I would return because of that guilt. He took a step forward. Do you believe that the car is the only issue here? At last I said no. It seems to me that you need me more than you ever acknowledged. I shut the door after that. That evening, I updated my phone number. Pulling the last path out of a dead tree was how it felt. My number change wasn't a big deal. It wasn't retaliation. I simply ought to have taken care of it long ago. I kept it a secret. I didn't send them a final note. They were unknown to me. That. However, I should have realized that they wouldn't tolerate it. My work phone rang during lunch 2 days later. Unknown figure. Something urged me to answer, even though I was on the verge of leaving it on voicemail. I picked it up without a word. It was my mother. She began speaking as soon as she heard silence. She didn't inquire about my well-being. She didn't inquire about my desire to speak. She threw herself into it as if she had been practicing. We are concerned for you. According to her, my dad was having problems falling asleep, claimed that Ryan was depressed and that he hadn't been eating healthily. Your brother misses you as much as we did as children, she added. And because I was playing a video game, I had just bounded out of the room. The fraud was not mentioned by her. She made no mention of attempting to get into my lease. No responsibility, no apology, just worry. Weaponized as usual. Then she started working. Rob, we need your help. She claimed that because of their tight budget and the mounting late fees, the mortgage company had sent out a second notice. That maybe just for a few months I could help cover it again while they figure things out. Said she hated asking, but you're the one we can count on. I hung up. Later that day, an email came through, this time from my dad. He said he was trying to give me space, but was reaching out as a father who still believes in his son. The tone was even composed and professional. The toast had been misunderstood, he said, that I misinterpreted it. He claimed that it was intended to be a humorous moment to commemorate Ryan's victory. The second half followed. His true motivation for writing. 2 mortgage payments were missed. A final warning had been sent by the bank. The house was in danger. They were looking at every possibility, he said, but perhaps that wasn't necessary. Perhaps I could get the automatic payments back in place. Perhaps things could return to normal. Dad, he signed it with love, no mention of the years I had supported them. Nothing about what they took or what I gave. I received a letter in my mailbox the following day, written by hand. Even before I opened it, I could recognize my mother's cursive. She wrote about my childhood Halloween costumes, bedtime stories, and how I would nod off on her shoulder when we were traveling. She claimed to have missed that me, claimed that I had hardened and that I had once been considerate and kind. Then she gradually began to feel guilty. Claimed that she and her father were growing older, that they had no plans, and that they never anticipated our growing separation. The line that stuck with me then came, "Don't allow your pride to ruin our remaining family." On the left. I spent a long time staring at those words. Then I received a text from a former college pal. Someone I hadn't spoken to in a long time. I got a screenshot from him. Ryan sent it. He had received a message from Ryan asking if he could help me make sense. I was spiraling, they said. Stated that he was concerned that I would permanently cut off all communication due to a miscommunication. I pretended that I was the one who had done something wrong, and that I likely regretted everything and only needed encouragement to return. I came to my final decision at that point. The car had been sitting in the impound lot, so I drove there. I informed the man behind the desk that I didn't want it returned, reclaimed, or sold. Under my name, I had it towed to a locked garage. Plates were taken out. Canceled insurance. In a drawer, the title was sealed away. I refused to return it. Never. It was never truly theirs, not because I wanted to punish them. They showed no regard for it. It was not earned by them. And now, like all the other things they took away from me, silence was to be its fate. Not touched. Completed. They had given up on the car. Similar to me. 5 weeks have passed. They still haven't figured out how to get in touch with me. Or perhaps they gave up at last. In any case, the quiet has become the norm. It feels different in my apartment. It is more silent. Not only are they no longer there, but I'm also not constantly checking my phone in anticipation of the next task. The subsequent test. I would be expected to resolve the next crisis. I've begun taking little actions. Nothing remarkable. Preparing food. I genuinely desire. Walking without looking at the time. I sleep at night without having any jaw tension because I only answer calls that I recognize. There is no underlying guilt. I noticed Ryan's Instagram account appeared under a mutual friend story a few days ago. He was grinning as if nothing had happened while attending a house party, but I could see that he had a bus pass in his hand. Tucked behind his phone, it was just barely visible in the background. I didn't focus on the picture. I simply ended the app and went on. I received a letter from the mortgage lender last week. They had begun work on the house prior to foreclosure. I anticipated it. I only skimmed it enough to realize that they were out of time not reading the entire thing. The house I had saved 3 times was on the verge of disappearing from their grasp. I didn't feel victorious. I also didn't feel bad. I experienced a sense of detachment and distance, as if I had just awoken from an extremely lengthy and peculiar dream. I was always told by my parents that I was fortunate to be tolerated because I was too invested, too serious, and too sensitive. They say those things frequently, and I believed them for years, believing that if I just did more and gave more, they would no longer regard me as a visitor in my own family. However, they never did. People who rely on you without showing you any respect, I've discovered, never truly love you. The version of you that keeps them afloat is the one they adore. They call it betrayal, the instant you cease to be helpful and demand something in return. I didn't burn the bridge then, I simply left it. And it was already burning when I turned to look behind me. I will not return, not right now, never. It's been 3 months. I never imagined that life would find a rhythm. Calm, keep quiet, free. I hardly ever hear from anyone, not a single phone call letter or social media ping. I feel as though I have landed on solid ground after stepping off a stormy pier. Then at 8 p.m. yesterday, I heard someone knock on my door. I nearly didn't respond. Even though I usually ignore sudden interruptions, I felt compelled to open it. I didn't recognize the woman standing there. Early 40s, gentle eyes. She said, passing me an envelope. "I believe you own this." Not another word. It contained a notarized statement and one photograph. The pictures showed my brother Ryan, with a DMV receipt, bright eyes, and untidy hair. The notarized letter stated that Ryan had given someone else, not me, ownership of a car. It was a 2008 hatchback that had been restored. Dependable, but rusty. Robert read the note beneath the windshield wiper in the picture. "I appreciate everything you did for me when I needed it." Then there was a brief letter from Ryan written by hand. "I was mistaken, Rob. Without realizing what I had lost, I took. The fancy car isn't this one. I could only get it. My very first vehicle. You must have it for me. No conditions. Ryan Love." I spent a lot of time looking at that letter. No hurry, no guilt. Simply acknowledging that something had changed. That perhaps at last, the family I believed I had lost was attempting to return. I didn't cry, even if it was just in the smallest way. I took my time calling him. I placed the photo and letter on my desk next to the loan document folder that I haven't yet disposed of. I went to the bank tonight to double-check everything. On the way back, I realized that it didn't matter, that I wanted to make sure this old hatchback wasn't a trick. The vehicle was undamaged. I owned it. No documentation, no loans. Only a gesture. I'm still unsure if I'll ever make the initial effort to get in touch. I might take that car out for a drive. For the time being, I might just leave it in the garage. However, something inside of me changed for the first time. Not enough to pardon just yet. Insufficient to rename it family, but perhaps enough to begin to speculate about what might happen next. Story 2. We need to make some cuts, I told my family on my 30th birthday. I can't continue to pay for everything indefinitely. Then start with your brother's six-figure debt, Dad said, rolling his eyes. I declined. My belongings were on the porch when I returned. The locks were replaced. Consider what you did. I didn't cause a scene, they said. I remained silent. Simply schedule the message. Everything changed the following morning. Cheers to your birthday, Josh. My mother's tone was upbeat and phony, as if she hadn't just made me feel bad for not volunteering to pay off Kyle's auto loan an hour before. At the end of the dining table was where I sat. In front of me was a piece of store-bought cake, a crooked 30-candle drips half-melted wax. With one arm casually slung over the chair, my dad was slouching across from me. One is drinking a beer. With one hand, my 28-year-old brother Kyle, who is unemployed and seemingly allergic to responsibility, was texting while using the other to browse through his phone. His brand new iPhone. Naturally, the one I purchased. I cleared my throat and said that. Despite my racing heart, I made an effort to sound composed. We must discuss the money. Dad gave a grunt. Mom blinked. Carl didn't raise his head. I can't keep going over what I said again. My goal is to create a future for myself. Here I've been paying for groceries, utilities, and the mortgage. Kyle, I paid off. Last year I received a second DUI fine. I have to make some cuts. Carl raised his head. Next. You're behaving as though it's charity. I gazed at him. Yes, it is. He chuckled. Whoa. All right. Dad leaned forward after that. People squinted as if I had just insulted the Pope. Then begin with the six-figure debt owed by your brother. Isn't that the true problem? Mom shot him a sidelong glance, as if she wished he hadn't spoken. Carl froze. I refuse to pay that. Silently, I said. I'm not in charge of that. The room became chilly. Nobody made a move. Dad reclined once more, lips quivering into a sneer-like expression. I guess we know where you stand, he said. The following day, when I returned from work, everything I owned, clothes, books, tools, and the laptop I used for freelancing, was arranged neatly on the porch. They had replaced the locks. The door was taped with a note. Consider what you did. It said nothing more. I gazed at the handwriting for a considerable amount of time. My mom is neat, accurate, and unmistakable. I didn't knock. I didn't shout. I refrained from crying. I inhaled deeply, gathered my belongings, and left. I scheduled the message after that. After a birthday eviction and a note that felt like a slap, everything changed the following morning to help us understand how we got here. You would need to go back a decade. Carl totaled his first car when I was 20 years old. Intoxicated naturally. Mom broke down. I, the golden oldest son with a reliable job and no criminal history, paid the tow fee and gave Dad a loan of $3,000 for repairs after he screamed. He never reimbursed it. Originally intended to be a one-time occurrence, it somehow turned into a pattern. I was to blame for Kyle's college dropout because I failed to assist him with his studies, when he experienced 3 job losses in a year. When he overdrafted his account, I received a lecture about how some people simply struggle more. My mother calls me, guilt-laced and gentle. He's your brother Josh, my dear. Can't you just cover it this once? And I always did. I paid the rent when Kyle got evicted. I paid the insurance on his car. A car I walked to work, and he drove to parties. While Kyle spent his days in the basement working on music and doing nothing productive, I paid for groceries, paid our parents' property taxes when they fell behind, and still managed to pay for night classes to earn my electrical systems certification. The worst thing, he didn't even act appreciative. He even pretended that he was entitled to it. Josh is doing very well. Waving his hand as if I were a faceless ATM, he would say, He's got it. Big brothers are there for that. My folks made it up. I had the option to move out. It ought to have. However, my mother would cry every time I brought it up and say, This house only feels like a home with you in it. Don't be dramatic, and remind me that I only paid a portion of the bills, such as paying for everything, but the phone plan wasn't sufficient, Dad would say. Kyle, too. Why leave when you've got it so good? He would smirk. Yes, I had a nice time. My brother borrowed money from me to purchase new headphones while I worked 60-hour weeks and hardly saw the light of day. Dad used my paycheck to fix the air conditioner while I skipped lunches to save money. He told me to be thankful that I didn't have to deal with a landlord. 2 months prior to my birthday, everything came to a head. I discovered Kyle hosting a party after returning home from a 14-hour shift. In the living room, I had my gaming PC, which I had been building over the course of 5 years, connected to his sound system. On the couch, his friends were unconscious. Bottles of beer were all over the floor. I had a sticky keyboard. I didn't shout. I simply disconnected everything and returned to my room. Mom gave me a lecture the following morning. "You made him feel ashamed," she said sharply. "His friend caught you acting like a crazy person. I said they were using my belongings." She yelled, "It's not just your house." Here, everything is shared. That word spread. Like a slap to me, shared. Similar to the mortgage I paid. I literally had money taken out of my account for the groceries I purchased and the electricity bill. That evening, I reviewed my spending plan. I was very near. I could actually get out this time with just a few more months of saving. Kyle then came up with the brilliant idea of trading cryptocurrency as a new business. Of his student loans, he invested $25,000. He lost it in 2 weeks due to loans he had no intention of repaying. He placed the blame on his friends, the market, and the app. He then faced me. He said, "You could spot me 10 grand," as if he needed a lift to the shop to help me get back on course. I chuckled, and I declined for the first time in a long time. The tone changed at that point. I was no longer trustworthy. I was elitist, ungrateful, and self-centered. "Do you believe that you are now superior to us?" One evening after supper, that person asked. "Simply because you have some cash on hand." I said, "I'm not better. I'm simply worn out." Kyle tweeted early the following morning. He hoped I wouldn't notice. "However, some only give when they believe they can manipulate you. Cut them off and see their real selves." More than 300 people liked him. I said nothing at all. When my birthday finally arrived, I foolishly and naively believed that perhaps, just possibly, we could maintain good relations. No drama, a small cake, and a quiet dinner. I received an ambush instead. Dad watched me the entire time. "You're daring me to mention money. Kyle is making jokes about how I should open up my non-existent trust fund." Mom's smile is too bright, as if she had enough strength to prevent it all from exploding. "Let's cheer." Finally, I admitted that I couldn't continue to pay for everything. The dam broke. Then begin with your sibling. Debt of 6 figures. Not as a joke, though, as an expectation rather than a challenge. They also didn't argue when I said no. They simply tossed me out like trash. However, they made a single error. They failed to remember. He instilled in me the values of patience, silence, and never reacting. Because I had a plan this time, their note went unanswered by me. Didn't knock, did not send a text, did not cry. I simply loaded my belongings into my old Toyota's back seat, packed my bags, and drove to the most affordable motel I could find. The vending machine eats your money without regret, one of those roadside ones where the air smells like cigarettes. With the note still crumpled in my fist, I sat on the edge of the bed. "Consider what you did." Yes, I did. I gave it a lot of thought. I scheduled the message after that. You see, I've learned a few things over the years. One is that each family has its own legend and myth. They tell themselves, "This is how ours went." The reliable one is Josh. Josh always lends a hand. Josh is always there. We can do anything we want because he always shows up. They didn't know. For the previous 2 years, I had been keeping a record of everything. Each and every invoice transfer and Venmo request. I keep the receipt for every time I give someone a handout. Every guilt trip, every passive-aggressive message. "You're being dramatic" every time they say that. I requested that boundaries be recorded, saved, and dated. Then there was the letter I wrote just before my birthday several months ago. When I first began to consider leaving, what if I did? It was not a letter of farewell. It was an all-out confession. How I concealed the second mortgage payment from them. Because I, not the bank, received the call. How I found out Kyle had stolen my identity to apply for a $15,000 personal loan. Refused. Thank God. But the inquiry was still on my credit report. How my parents knew and asked me not to press charges. Family sticks together, they said. I stuck until I didn't. That morning, the morning after I got thrown out of the house I paid for, I pressed send. I didn't just send it to them, I sent it to our extended family. My godmother in Tampa, Uncle Dave in New Jersey, my mom's cousin's dad's siblings, their church group, everyone, along with the receipts, screenshots, bank records, text messages, voice recordings, all neatly organized. I even included a spreadsheet titled, What Josh Actually Paid For. It went viral within our family in under an hour. By noon, my phone was melting. 26 missed calls from mom, 8 from dad called. Didn't call. He sent one text. You didn't have to do that. That was cold. I didn't respond. At 12:37 p.m., my Aunt Maria, who I hadn't seen in years, sent me a message. Good for you. I always knew they were using you. Proud of you, sweetheart. Then came the fallout. Apparently, my parents' reputation in their little suburban bubble meant more to them than I thought. The image of the perfect, close-knit, morally upright family shattered. People started asking questions. Why was Josh footing the bill while Kyle went on vacations? Why did the note on the door look like something out of a Lifetime movie? Why did Kyle have new headphones, sneakers, and tattoos while unemployed? Why did Josh live in the basement like a tenant when he was paying for everything? Dad tried to spin it. We were giving him structure, he told one relative. It was all agreed upon. Wrong move. Unattached. The recording from the night they kicked me out. I'd been recording on my phone, slipped into my jacket pocket before dinner. The voice note was crystal clear. Dad. Then start with your brother's debt. Me. I'm not paying that, Dad. Then get out, Mom. Consider what you did. They couldn't spin that. The kicker. I also reported the stolen identity case. I'd let it slide the first time. Not anymore. When the police showed up at the house to ask Kyle about the fraudulent loan attempt, things got loud. A neighbor caught it on video. Yelled voices, a slammed door. Kyle shouting something about how he deserved a break. Someone, probably my mom, screamed, "We told you not to make this worse." That clip landed on the local neighborhood Facebook group. And just like that, the family who used to whisper about other people's drama became the front page gossip. I was not present when it occurred. Moving into my new flat kept me too busy. An apartment above a downtown flower shop. Morning sun that is quiet. A kitchen free of the odor of old quarrels. That night, I used the money I should have been saving all along to pay the deposit. With just my laptop and some takeaway and no TV, I sat on the couch and watched the mayhem from a distance. When I didn't answer, they made numerous attempts to call me again. Mom arrived at my workplace. She waited in the entrance hall, red-eyed with my favorite casserole in a Tupperware container, as if that would reverse years of use. We met outside. I stopped her before she could open her mouth. I said, I'm not going back. Be calm. Cold even. She whispered, Josh, this family is being torn apart by you. I said, I just stopped holding it together, and laughed. She winced. I also didn't feel bad for once. It changed at that point. Not only the dynamics within the family, me. At last I could see them clearly, not as defenseless parents, not as a frail brother, but as individuals who had to make decisions. Several times. And now they had to deal with the fallout. For the first time in my life, it's odd how quiet can seem louder than yelling. I wasn't waking up to the sound of my dad banging cabinets like he was having a fit while wearing a polo shirt, or Kyle's music shaking the plasterboard. I wasn't avoiding my mother's passive-aggressive outbursts in anticipation of the next emotional bomb. Rather, I experienced silence in the mornings. I didn't check to see if anyone had used the last of the milk when I made coffee. I wouldn't have to worry about my wallet going missing for no apparent reason if I left it on the counter. Every purchase, every boundary, and every breath didn't need to be justified by me. Nobody requested money. Nobody asked for an explanation. No one sent me a manipulative text. At first, it was confusing. I kept thinking that the quiet would end, that when I walked in the door, Kyle would be sprawled out on my couch, his shoes on the cushions, and he would ask me if I could see him again. However, they never arrived. The calls continued, I see. Not initially. Mom's voice was shaky and carefully layered with guilt in her lengthy voicemails. This isn't you, Josh. You have always been the one with strength. The assistant. Don't let pride destroy our family, please. Dad texted once. Only one. You should be proud of who you are. I didn't answer. The messages eventually slowed and eventually stopped. I received a handwritten letter from Kyle 3 weeks after I moved out. It was surprisingly brief. I am aware of my error. I was simply doing what I was always permitted to do. Now, though, everything is against me. Both parents are in disarray. We no longer hear from anyone. You blew everything up. I hope it was worthwhile. Don't apologize. Simply assign blame. They provided me with all the information I required. I didn't respond. I started working on restoring what they had attempted to take away from me instead. We need help with the bills this month, so I decided to sign up for a coding boot camp, something I'd wanted to do for years but kept putting off. I began working as a freelancer in the evenings, saving for my desired future, not the one who coerces me into giving money. I made some true friends, the kind of people who only asked for honesty, people who didn't give a damn about my earnings, the way I was. I joined a climbing gym in my area. I rediscovered my passion for risk-taking and movement, pushing myself to the limit, not transporting people who wouldn't move. Additionally, therapy was helpful. It turns out that being the fixer for years leaves invisible bruises. It was referred to as parental fixation by my therapist. When a youngster is supposed to act like an adult, both financially and emotionally, she showed me that I was never self-centered. I was worn out. They collapsed back at the old house in the meantime. Mom had to return to her job. She detested it. She had been using someone else's money to play house manager for the past 10 years. Mine. Dad began to drink more. He apparently got into a heated argument with a neighbor who inquired about Josh's predicament. I've heard that Kyle has finally found employment at a petrol station. The duration was 6 days. The manager was then held accountable. As usual, the extended family withdrew. They had witnessed too much pain. The evidence did not support the myth of our contented little family. I also didn't give a damn. I wasn't trying to fix it for the first time in my life. I was not present at Thanksgiving. I spent it with family and friends, those who didn't tread carefully and instead laughed at the dinner table. I brought pie. They meant it when they referred to me as family. My godmother gave me a card for Christmas. There was a brief note inside. You were worthy of better. And at last you asserted it. You have my admiration. Reading it made me cry. Not because I was depressed, because I felt seen for the first time. After you burn your old life to the ground, do you know what happens? Nothing. No spectacular explosions, no reconciliations at the last minute. Nothing but quiet. And I've never heard anything so beautiful. My phone didn't ring with last-minute requests for money or guilt-laced texts for the first time in 30 years. There were no urgent calls about Kyle's license being revoked, about Dad needing help with taxes he didn't anticipate, or about Mum sobbing because we no longer feel like a family. They anticipated my stumbling return. They did it every time. They believed that I would feel bad. They believed I would feel isolated. But this is what really took place. I was liberated. I was able to breathe. I was able to stand by myself. The one I purchased. I'm clean furnished and unconcerned about food theft, key theft, or future demands. I've spent so much time carrying my family around that I've forgotten what it's like to stand up straight. For my own sake. To be unnecessary. I was once referred to as the family's backbone. No, the fuse was me, as well as now that I've left. There is nowhere left for the fire they started around me to spread. But let's go back to them. I met Kyle 2 months after the explosion. It was at a petrol station, of course. Behind the counter was him. Name tag. Sunken, crooked eye. Still exuded that phony swagger, but it appeared shabby, like a poor imitation of a more successful version of himself. Josh! He grinned. I was surprised to see you in town. I simply nodded. He leaned closer. You realize that you truly messed up for them. I blinked. You're referring to the time I stopped covering your debt, he gave a shrug. The fallout is still affecting them. You truly created a mess. I gave him a direct look. You think that by making my life better, I'm destroying yours. He stared at the door as if he couldn't believe the ATM had left after I paid for my gas. He's still not understanding. Not one of them does. Because Kyle and others like him don't learn from mistakes. Not until the funds are exhausted and the publicity wanes. And I'm not going to stay to see that lesson unfold. The thing is this. Nobody talks to you about leaving a toxic family. The pain is not in the distance. It's the knowledge that you've never experienced unconditional love. You were appreciated for your sacrifice and your silence, your financial account. However, love isn't love without respect. It's leverage. So would you ever speak to them again when they ask? No, I don't hesitate. For the first time, I love myself more than their acceptance. I used to want their approval. Similar to oxygen. Every promotion, every loan I paid back, every good grade. A frantic wish that perhaps they would notice me this time. However, they only saw my ability to help them. I was never beneath it. I see myself now, a man who settled 3 non-existent mortgages. He never tried, but a man stayed up late to tutor his brother. A man who always felt like a visitor in a home that kept the lights on. And lastly, a man who stopped talking. I've started over in my new life. And guilt or obligation aren't the basis this time. There is peace. It's a decision. I own it. On the weekends, I go hiking, read, and attend classes. I'm taking photography lessons. For years, I put this off because I had more important things to pay for. I'm dating someone who asks about my day, doesn't call me selfish for setting boundaries, and doesn't need saving. I occasionally lie in bed late at night thinking about the child. I was once the one who walked carefully through his own house, who ceremoniously gave him his paycheck, and who thought that if you worked hard enough, they would love you properly. And you left, I whispered. You succeeded. They are unknown to you. No more silence. Allow them to rumor. Permit them to embellish the tale. Let them say, I'm not thankful. Dramatic. Chilly. Because this is the reality. Without me, they will never say it aloud. Without me, their system fell apart. Without me, their lives were not the same. At last, the truth was spoken aloud. Unquestionably raw. I didn't even need to shout. I simply turned to leave. Additionally, leaving the door locked can occasionally be the most subdued act of rebellion. Story 3. My family blocked me from the group chat during my wedding. Then I came across pictures of them on vacation in Hawaii. Caption the families that are now complete. I only sent one message. While it lasts, enjoy it. I removed my name from the family business that day. The payroll account was frozen. My dad received a call from the Internal Revenue Service a week later. He knocked on my door for 20 minutes that night. When I opened it, it wasn't just that they weren't there that surprised me. They blocked me from the family group chat at that precise moment on my wedding day. I recall waiting outside the location immediately following the ceremony. Everyone was making their way to the reception hall as the sun was lowering and the sky had a gentle golden hue. Emma was laughing with her bridesmaids about the wind catching her veil. In my pocket, my phone buzzed. When I looked, I saw that it said, "You have been removed from Smith Family Core." I had assumed it was another congratulations message. No context, no warning, simply gone. As if it were written in a foreign language, I gazed at the screen. My initial thought was that it was an error. Perhaps Caleb accidentally tapped something. Perhaps Dad was trying to change the group photo or mute notifications because he was confused. That group chat has existed for 8 years. Birthdays and holidays. News about the family business. Everything passed through it. However, when I attempted to open it, nothing. I couldn't get in. At that point, I became aware that they were absent. Their table was empty of chairs. As a result, the chairs were arranged precisely. Mark, Caleb, Mom, and Dad are all empty. The waiters were constantly checking for tardiness. Alan, my closest friend, asked if they were stuck in traffic. I simply shrugged. I did not want to spoil the night. The fact that they had RSVP'd more than once made matters worse. They had filled out the online form, texted to confirm again the previous month, and even discussed their attire. My mother went to great lengths to avoid conflict with the bridesmaids. Mark invited his girlfriend to attend. Yes, I replied. They weren't merely anticipated. The damn plan included them. Before taking family pictures, the photographer kept asking if we wanted to wait for them. I continued to put it off. Eventually, we simply left them out. During dinner, Jody asked in a whisper if there had been any interaction between us. I told her I had no idea. That was the reality. I didn't receive a response until the third day of our honeymoon. Before going to our cabin rental, we were in Napa only for a few tastings. I opened Instagram to see Emma selecting a bottle, merely by habit. Then they appeared standing on a Maui beach. They are all four smiling, holding cocktails, and wearing matching floral prints. Even his father, who never takes pictures, had Mark's arm around him. The caption said that the family was now complete. I merely sat there. No passion, no tantrum. Simply empty. Two asides. At first, she remained silent. Simply place her hand over mine. I informed her that I had one item to send. From her phone, I launched WhatsApp. She typed one message while still in the group. While it lasts, enjoy it. I opened my laptop after that. Smith wrote, my dad wasn't the only one in logistics. I had been making it a reality for the past 6 years. I was the one who got us online, even though we were co-owners. Got the job at Walmart. Half of the logistics were automated. For transactions exceeding $10,000, I would configure the dual signature protocol. He had no idea how to use it. I deleted my name from the company registration after logging in. I put my shares in a holding pattern that resulted in their freezing. I also froze the payroll account, which is crucial. Withdrawals must be approved by me. That Friday was payroll due. I stayed out of the spotlight. Did not speak up. Let the quiet do the talking. I received a call from an unidentified number a week later. Didn't respond to Dad's CPA's voicemail. The IRS had apparently noticed some disparities. Missing paperwork and 2 years' worth of unpaid state taxes. And the amusing part, they couldn't have produced half of the necessary financial records without me. Before I even got to the front door that night, I heard the knocking, 20 minutes straight. I took a while to respond. I held him up. He was standing there when I opened the door looking red-faced and sweating as if he had been in hell. And what he said first, "What did you do?" For a few seconds, I allowed the silence to linger. He anticipated that I would recoil, defend myself, or perhaps even offer an apology. I simply waited while leaning against the doorframe. He moved forward as if he were going to enter. I remained motionless. The payroll was frozen by you. Are you aware of your actions? I gave a nod. Yes, I am fully aware of my actions. He would get somewhere if he continued to talk like that. Claimed that the drivers threatened to walk. That was already in the warehouse crew's possession. Penalties for missing deadlines were demanded by 2 clients. Claimed that because my credentials were linked to the online reporting, the accountant was unable to even file. The one thing he believed would shake me was then dropped. This morning the IRS called. 5 years' worth of returns are being examined. 5. They believe we have been concealing our earnings. If this isn't fixed, we're all going to collapse. That word struck a different chord. We're all falling. I reminded him that the one guy they excluded from the family chat on his wedding day was not included in this. Apparently that included everyone who could travel to Hawaii and pretend I didn't exist while grinning for the camera. He attempted to explain that it was simply a bad moment, and that they needed space, and that it wasn't personal. My wedding gave you the space you needed. That momentarily silenced him. He quickly changed to anger, claimed that I was being childish petty and discarding everything we had worked so hard to build. Then he took a folded piece of paper out of his jacket. After weighing it once, he threw it between us on the floor. I signed it, the same document 3 years ago, and it was a copy. I had forgotten a clause that was hidden in the early partnership filings. Under certain circumstances, it granted him some partial authority to override financial freezes. However, those requirements necessitated evidence of carelessness or deliberate injury. He was going to accuse me of undermining the business, that I did it maliciously. Even though he was bluffing, it was enough to keep the days that followed interesting. His attorney sent a cease and desist letter by Monday. I had responded to mine by Tuesday with a thorough audit of all the financial decisions I had made since joining, including the ones I had flagged over the years, all of which I had screenshots of, and several of which had verged on tax fraud. I kept most of it from Emma. Although she was aware of the outline, I spared her the anxiety. Before my family's chaos spilt into our new life, I wanted her to have at least a few days of peace after we returned from our honeymoon. For the first time in 2 months, Mom texted on Wednesday, "Could we please have a conversation? This is becoming unmanageable." No explanation, no apology. A tiny, delicate olive branch tossed like a discarded tissue. The situation changed by Thursday when the CPA began contacting me directly, even though I didn't reply. Stated quietly that the IRS was investigating more than just the company. They were investigating Caleb, a phony vendor, offshore accounts, and Dad's personal finances. The IRS wasn't merely snooping, they were hunting. And I still hadn't done a single thing. Emma and I were wrapping up our lunch when the call came in. For the first time since the wedding, we had been organizing thank you notes at the dinner table. Things seemed to be starting to calm down. My phone buzzed with an unknown number while we were making jokes about who had the worst handwriting. I took a step back and replied. Richard was the one. A CPA, the family business, and a man I had only spoken to twice in 6 years, and only when something was amiss. He wasted no time. "Listen, David, you should be aware of what's going on, even though I know you're no longer involved." He spoke in a sharp click. I didn't even inquire about how he obtained my number. I simply listened. As it happens, the payroll account did more than just bounce a few paychecks when I froze it. It interrupted a mid-transfer transaction that the bank's compliance team had flagged for audit. The account belonged to a shell company that purportedly maintained fleet software. However, that vendor was non-existent. The vendor's founding documents listed the address as a mailbox store in Nevada. Caleb. At that point, everything began to make sense. Why did Caleb always participate in the business in such a casual manner? Why he never had to describe his actual actions? "How bad is it?" I asked Richard. After a brief silence, he stated that the IRS had now referred the matter to a criminal investigator. They examined every transaction over the previous 5 years, not just one. My father had used my digital signature on a number of documents that I hadn't even seen, and it seems that my withdrawal had revealed the chain of irregularities. Fake invoices, inflated contracts, and unreported foreign income. I sat with it for a while after hanging up. I could have left at that moment. See them burn. However, I was still in charge of the backup server, which I had configured for complete financial transparency. It contained all of my emails, contracts, invoices, and approvals, and nobody could access it without my password. I simply locked the system remotely. I didn't even need to remove anything. Emma asked if there was a problem when she noticed me working. I informed her that there was no point in trying to fix it at this time. I received a text from a Jody later that night. The IRS called again and said, "Your dad is in a spiral. Caleb hasn't had any sleep. Your mother is going crazy. It was not gratifying, not just yet. It seemed inevitable." Then I heard a knock at about 9 o'clock at night. Before I looked, I knew it was him. Dad was standing there, the same outfit as last week. His hair was unkempt, as if he had spent the entire day rubbing it through. I didn't have to invite him inside before he accepted. A thick envelope was just thrust into my chest. "Go through it. In all of this, you are not innocent. Right here." I remained at the door and slowly opened it. There were printed emails with excerpts of correspondence from 2 years ago between me and a logistics client. I recall that transaction, though, because my name was on the approval line of a big shipment contract. A standard delivery quote was approved by me. He was the one who later changed the invoice to conceal excess money and inflate the delivery cost. "If the IRS sees those emails out of context, they won't just come after me," he said, leaning in. "They will also pursue me." He believed that I would drop everything because I would be afraid. Unfreeze the accounts, log back in, and assist them in cleaning up the mess. Not even blinking. "I wish you luck in that endeavor." I said, "You changed those figures." "Not me." His voice changed. After attempting to persuade me, he said that we could clean it up together if I returned right away, claimed that they erred by skipping the wedding, and that it is still a family business. However, we can get past that. He had never even brought it up before. And he believed that was sufficient. All of this would be resolved if he made a passing reference to leaving me on the most significant day of my life. I simply gave a headshake. That bridge was destroyed by you. You're angry now. The fire is getting bigger. He remained motionless for an additional moment, as if he had something more to say. He turned and proceeded down the driveway after that. I locked the door after closing it. Not to be safe. To illustrate a point, our former legal counsel sent me an email the following morning. It seems that my dad was attempting to raise liquid cash by selling company shares to a third party in a panic sale, but he was unsuccessful. Every significant asset still had my name attached to it, and the investigation was now as well. I anticipated repercussions, irate text threats, and perhaps even a last-ditch voicemail from my mother attempting to mend things. Hearing from someone I hadn't spoken to in more than 10 years was unexpected. I received an email on Friday morning from someone I hadn't seen since high school. My dad's estranged younger brother is Uncle Grant. When I was still in college, he had been forced out of the company. I was always told that he caused issues with the board and mismanaged funds. He sent a brief email. I heard what was going on. I waited for someone to notice it at last. Meet me if you want the full picture. Everything is mine. At first, I didn't respond. I had no idea how to interpret it. Emma insisted that I go, stated that perhaps knowing what I was truly up against would be helpful at the very least. So I went to a diner 2 towns over and met him. He didn't appear resentful, but he did look older than I remembered, simply exhausted. Before our coffee had even arrived, he slid a manila folder across the table. Copies of old bank transfers emails, and one document in particular that made my stomach turn were all inside. It had to do with agreement. Day-to-day 8 years ago, with Uncle Grant's and my dad's signature. The rationale behind the acquisition. Not poor management. Silence. Not failure. Uncle Grant had reportedly learnt that Dad and Caleb had been using surplus warehouse lease income to fund a side venture, a private shell company operating under Mom's name that purchased and sold commercial trucks at exorbitant prices, primarily to our own business. The scam was full circle, draining the company's resources while enriching themselves. Grant would disappear and never talk about it again after learning that it offered him a payout on one condition. He kept the documents in case something went wrong, but he accepted the deal. Now that the walls were closing in and the IRS was circling, he thought it was time for someone else to find out. I took it all. I scanned it. Twice backed it up. I thanked him and walked away. The following day, I received a request from Smith & Rose's legal team to attend a mediation call immediately. They wanted to get everything settled as soon as possible, offer me a discreet buyout of all my shares in return for granting me access to the servers and locked accounts. I didn't pay attention to the message. That same afternoon, Emma came home with news of her own. While shopping downtown, she ran into one of the warehouse workers, Diego, a guy who'd been with the company since I joined. He told her something strange. Apparently, my dad had told the employees that I was the reason no one was getting paid, that I'd sabotaged the system. After a fight with my brothers, he was trying to turn them against me, said I was bitter and unstable. I didn't even get mad. I just laughed because by Sunday, something happened that none of them expected. The IRS didn't just freeze the business accounts, they froze the personal ones too. My dad's, my mom's, and Caleb's, all pending formal investigation. No access, no transfers, no warnings. Emma and I were having dinner when I got the alert. All 3 of them were on a list of financial holds issued as part of the wider fraud probe. They were locked out of their money. Everything. I set my foot down, leaned back, and smiled. The house of cards wasn't just falling now. It had collapsed. Monday morning, I woke up to 33 missed calls, 9 from that 10 from Mom. The rest split between Mark and Caleb. Not a single voicemail, just silent panic. By noon, I had received 2 emails from the IRS requesting copies of the backup financial records, specifically the archived correspondence contracts and vendor activity that only I could access. I didn't respond yet. I wanted them to sweat. That evening, I got an unexpected knock. Emma checked the people first. It was my mother. I hadn't seen her since Christmas 2 years ago. She always preferred to play the quiet partner in family disasters. Passive smiling. Never directly responsible. But this time, She was the one standing on our doorstep, gripping her purse like it was the last stable thing in her life. She asked to come in. Emma left the room. We sat in silence for a few seconds, and then she launched into a rehearsed apology. She said she didn't know the full story, that she never agreed to skip the wedding, that Dad had convinced her it would be less tense if they just went away for the weekend. She insisted she tried to call. I told her she could have tried harder, told her I'd seen the group photo, the one with the caption about the family finally being whole. She shifted gears fast, said they were in trouble, that the IRS freeze meant they couldn't pay their mortgage, their credit cards, even their groceries. She said Dad was falling apart, that Caleb had a breakdown, and that the company would be destroyed if I didn't help with everything we had built over the years. She then said something that chilled me to the bone. "We are aware that there is an emergency fund." I went cold. Emma and I had arranged for that years ago. A different investment account that is in my name, bound by a trust, not even in the company's operations. We did not record it. Few people were aware of its existence. How I inquired. She paused. "It's possible that your father took some bank records from when you two had joint authority. He believes that funds ought to be reinvested in the company. Without the company, you would not have had it." She spoke as though it made sense, as if she thought it was true. I got to my feet. "I don't give a damn about his opinion. We own that money. On my wedding day, you all abandoned me. I owe you nothing," she pleaded. Said the words literally, "Please." She then made one final attempt at a card. "Your dad is going to go public if you don't help. Let's say you planned this and manipulated the books." I chuckled. She winced. They wanted to drag me down with them as they were cornered and drowning. I assured her that I had no plans to halt the inquiry, that I was only holding off on sending the IRS the entire archive because I wanted to see how far they would go. After a moment of stunned silence, she walked away without saying anything more. I turned in all of the emails, backup files, transaction logs, and Uncle Grant's paperwork the following morning. After shutting down the laptop, I took Emma to brunch. Allow them to burn. The investigation officially began 3 days after I sent the archive to the IRS. I was informed that it made the news by Emma. Due to years of tax evasion, a family-owned goods company is currently under federal audit. No names were given, but anyone in the area who knew the Smiths could figure it out. Friends began sending each other texts. Some of my former coworkers contacted me, some in disbelief, some simply to say they always sensed something wasn't right. My father sent me the last message I had ever read that evening. It was a screen grab of a court document written by his lawyer, in which he accused me of violating a fiduciary duty, causing harm to the business, and putting the whole family under financial and emotional strain. He threatened to file a civil lawsuit if I didn't remove the documents. The number was blocked by me. Without hesitation. I then deleted my name, email profile, and everything else after logging into the company portal, which was one of the few things that was still operational. Not in retaliation, not with malice. Merely because the moment had come. A few hours later, Mark attempted to call. This time, he left a voicemail. Claimed that I had overreached. Claimed that I ought to have dealt with this within the family. I misunderstood the situation, and we could have had a conversation according to a paragraph that Caleb sent me via email. It's funny. On my wedding day, nobody wanted to talk. All of them failed to appear, not a single message. However, they discovered their voices when their house was being audited, and their accounts were frozen. I didn't respond. They all made decisions. I broke off all communication. I wasn't spiteful when I blocked them. I simply didn't want their poison to continue seeping into the things Emma and I had created. 3 months later, we relocated out of state. The town is clean now. The emergency fund was left unaltered. I resumed private consultations. Emma returned to her teaching. Jody and a few other family members kept in touch, and our life became calm, steady, and genuine. When we got together for dinner, some of our wedding friends would still bring it up. How my family did something that no one could believe. How foolish it was to put a vacation ahead of the wedding of their own son. They only care about control, and when they lose it, they lose everything according to the consensus of all. It has now been almost a year. I still occasionally receive unsolicited letters from law firms or distant cousins who are trying to catch up. I disregard them. I have a new rhythm and a new home with Emma. Now we discuss children. We take trips when we feel like it. I never imagined that we would laugh as much as we do. I have lost my anger. Just finished. I occasionally tell the truth when someone asks if I miss them. I miss the person I believe them to be. However, that version never appeared. Not when it was important. And I won't now either. 6 days after I had assumed that everything was behind me, I received an email that completely stopped me cold. It wasn't a notice. It was from the IRS. Not a request. I'm grateful. In a formal statement, one of the case's senior agents acknowledged the importance of the information I supplied. I didn't anticipate it. It stated that several offshore accounts connected to fraudulent vendor payments, not just in my dad's name, had been found as a result of the backup records I submitted. Other colleagues were present, a few of whose names I knew from previous business gatherings. The email ended with something unexpected, even though 2 of them had already left the country. Based on the records, we will be sending out a subpoena for testimony. Although we think you are not aware of these activities, your cooperation could help us develop the case more broadly. That line caught my attention twice. My dad was no longer the only focus of this. This was larger. Emma discovered something in the mail later that afternoon. A heavy envelope. It was delivered by hand, but there was no return address. No label, no stamp. There were 2 items inside: a flash drive and a letter from Caleb. His letter was apologetic, rambling, and at times desperate. He claimed that Dad had lost his mind, that he was attempting to place the blame on anyone he could, and that he had coerced Caleb into creating the phony vendor accounts, about which Mom knew more than she admitted, but kept quiet out of fear of losing everything. He apologized for what transpired at the wedding, and stated that he didn't want to go down with them. He was aware that I would never forgive him. However, I might eventually come to understand if the flash drive helped to balance things out. I connected it to a disposable laptop. It contained spreadsheets, voice memos, internal emails, and even a few videos. In one of them, the father was laughing while speaking with someone in another country about how the child signs everything I put in front of him. I was that person. Another showed him describing to Caleb how to avoid banking thresholds by dividing vendor payments into smaller batches. It was sealed. I sent a brief message with all of this information to the IRS contact. Another present. Emma and I sat on the porch that evening. We said very little, just observed the rolling breeze and the darkening sky. And I came to a realization. This was no longer retaliation. It was taking something away. A last cleaning out of everything that attempted to ruin what ought to have been my greatest day ever, into a betrayed memory. It was just over now, and for good this time. Story 4. The call came on an ordinary Wednesday afternoon, just as I was setting my coffee mug down and settling into my worn-out desk chair. The number was unfamiliar, flashing urgently across my phone screen. Something in my gut twisted even before I answered. "Hello, is this Emily Carter?" The voice on the other end asked. "Yes," I replied cautiously. "This is Charles from Liberty National Bank. We're calling regarding your overdue mortgage balance of $523,000. We've sent several notices, but the words blurred. Mortgage $523,000. I didn't own a house. I didn't even own a new car. You must have the wrong person," I said, my voice shaking despite my efforts to sound calm. "Ma'am, the documents we have show your full name, date of birth, and social security number. You are listed as the primary borrower on the loan taken out 3 years ago." 3 years ago, my heart dropped. That was around the time Jessica, my younger sister, had been talking about wanting a bigger house when she couldn't afford. I sat frozen, the hum of my computer fan filling the silence. My mind raced, flipping through memories I didn't even know I was starring Jessica, flashing Pinterest boards of family dinners, my parents gushing about how Jessica deserves the best. How we all pitch in for family. But pitch in like this. After hanging up with the bank, promising to look into it when I could barely breathe, I pressed my palms to my eyes. Hard. My small one-bedroom apartment around me suddenly felt like it was caving in. There had to be a mistake. There had to be. I rifled through my drawers, pulling out every old document I had, praying I would find some clue that proved it wasn't me. But deep down, the icy grip of betrayal had already begun to wrap around my ribs. Because if it wasn't a mistake, there was only one explanation. I thought about how my parents always called me the responsible one, the one who didn't need help, who wouldn't make a fuss. Meanwhile, Jessica flitted from one bad decision to another, cushioned by Mom's whispered excuses and Dad's tired sighs. It had always been that way. I was the background character in my own family, useful, dependable, invisible. I pressed my forehead against the cool wood of my desk. Tears burned the back of my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. Not quite yet. This wasn't just about money. It was about trust. About being treated like my future. My life was something they could casually sign away without even a warning. My phone buzzed again, this time a text from my mother. "Hey, sweetheart. Hope you're having a good week. Family dinner, Sunday family dinner." Like everything was normal. Like my name wasn't tied to half $1 million of debt. I didn't sign for the taste in my mouth. Turned bitter. I typed back sure. And hit send. Because before anything else, before accusations or screaming matches, I needed to know the whole truth. And when I found it, I would decide exactly how loud or how silent my response would be, and something deep inside me promised. This time, I wouldn't stay invisible. The next morning, after a sleepless night of staring at the cracks in my ceiling, I sat hunched over the kitchen table, a steaming cup of untouched coffee beside me. My laptop was open tabs multiplying like weeds. Mortgage fraud, forged signatures, legal advice, blogs, warning signs of identity theft. But none of it prepared me for what I was about to see. I called the bank again, requesting a copy of the mortgage documents. The woman on the line was polite, almost mechanical, as she emailed them over within minutes. When the PDF opened, my breath caught in my throat. It was there. Page after page filled with my name, my information, and my signature. Except it wasn't mine. It looked close enough that someone who didn't know better might not notice, but I knew every curve of my real signature, every little tremble in my hand. This one was too perfect, too rehearsed. It felt like staring into a cracked mirror. I zoomed in, studying the slanted loops, the heavy tail on the Y in Emily, the way Carter was spelled just a little too neatly. My hands started to tremble. How could they do this? How could my own parents? The floor seemed to shift under me. I grabbed the edge of the table, grounding myself. I kept flipping through the pages, heart pounding harder with every line, every loan term, every initial scribbled on the margins, every signature. It was like watching someone rob me in slow motion. And the worst part was, they hadn't even thought I deserved to be warned. I thought about every family holiday where Jessica was treated like royalty, and I was expected to smile and clap from the sidelines. Every time I picked up the check. "Because you're doing better right now, sweetheart. Doing better until now." My tiny kitchen's walls felt like they were getting closer together. I let the storm swirl inside of me as I closed my eyes. Don't cry. Not quite yet. Just a hollow ache that grows. It was not a loud betrayal. There was no yelling or slamming of doors. Sharp as a scalpel gliding beneath the flesh, it was silent. I began to collect all the paper that connected me to them financially. Evidence included old credit reports, bank statements, and even birthday cards in which they made jokes about the accountable daughter. I knew I had to protect myself, but I wasn't sure what I would do with it exactly yet. Memories like a cruel movie reel flashed behind my eyes as the hours passed slowly. After failing out of college, Jessica flaunts her new vehicle. "You're the strong one," Mom says. When I graduated without anyone attending the ceremony, I just needed a little extra dad to give me a dog pat on the head. When Jessica fell, they had always expected me to be the one to take the fall. They hadn't even bothered to ask this time. They simply assumed I wouldn't fight back and signed my future away. By nightfall, a tidy stack of papers rested on the kitchen table, a silent pledge to myself. The girl who used to go above and beyond to be the good daughter was no longer there. Although I was unsure of my exact identity, I was certain that I would not remain silent indefinitely. Sunday arrived far too quickly. Standing in front of my parents' home, where I was raised, I gazed at the door as if it were the entrance to a courtroom. I wanted to turn around and act as though nothing had happened, to continue being the trouble-free, invisible daughter. But there's more. The part they were unaware they had made my back tense. Once, twice, I knocked. My mother was there when the door opened, beaming, as if everything had gone perfectly. "Me, I'm so happy you were able to attend my love. My dear." As soon as I entered, I was immediately transported back to my 100 favorite childhood memories by the smell of pot roast and lemon cleaner. They felt empty only now. With a beer balanced on the armrest, Dad was in the living room, half watching a football game. With her pricey purse strewn about carelessly next to her, Jessica was curled up on the couch, scrolling through her phone. They didn't even give me a good look. I sat down quietly, my heart thumping so loudly that I thought the walls might tremble. I waited. Allow them to settle in. Let them show themselves, like any other Sunday dinner was served. Chatter and laughter. Jessica griped about her foolish large yard's costly landscaping. Regarding the game, Dad grunted. Jessica is being showered with attention from her mother. When the plates were cleared, I finally said something. "Hello, may I ask you a question?" I spoke in a steady, low voice, as if I were going to inquire if they had noticed my missing scarf. 3 pairs of eyes turned to face me with mild curiosity. "Does anyone know anything about a mortgage with my name on it?" Quiet. A full, thick silence that made the ticking of the wall clock deafening. Jessica was the first to react. She shifted, pulling her sleeves down nervously. Mom's smile faltered. Dad coughed into his hand. I kept my expression calm, almost blank. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't accuse. I just waited. The first to break was Mom. "Honey, listen." She started reaching across the table like we were discussing the weather. "It's not a big deal, it's family. Jessica just needed a little help qualifying for her loan, that's all. It's not like you're actually paying anything." "Not a big deal." Jessica chimed in, voice defensive. "You have good credit, Em." "I don't. It's not fair that you wouldn't help. It's just paperwork. Just paperwork." I leaned back in my chair, letting the words settle around me like ash. They didn't even think it was wrong. They had convinced themselves it was normal that I was the bad guy for being upset. I nodded slowly, keeping my face carefully neutral. "Thanks for explaining," I said quietly. Jessica shrugged, already reaching for her phone again, as if the matter was closed. Mom beamed like she had soothed a silly little tantrum. Dad turned back to the game. None of them saw the storm brewing behind my calm eyes. They thought the old Emily was still sitting there. They didn't realize yet that the real storm would hit when they least expected it, and it would be silent until it wasn't. The drive home was a blur. Streetlights streaked across the windshield, but I barely saw them. My hands gripped the steering wheel tighter than necessary. The phantom of the tires on the pavement. The only sound in the car inside, though it was anything but quiet. Their words spun around in my head like a cruel carousel. "It's just paperwork. It's not a big deal. Family helps. Family." I thought about every sacrifice I had made. Every time I swallowed disappointment to keep the peace. Every time I picked up Jessica's mess behind the scenes, and for what? So they could handcuff me to a $523,000 debt without even a phone call. I pulled into my driveway and sat there staring at the darkened outline of my small house. For a long time, I didn't move. I let the betrayal settle deeper into my bones, burning a hole I knew would never fully heal. But I also realized something else. This was the moment they had finally freed me. Not by choice, not by apology, but by stripping away every last illusion I had clung to. About who they were, about what family meant. There was nothing left to protect anymore. No love to cling to, hoping it would fix itself. They had drawn the line. Now I would decide which side I stood on. I went inside, changed into my older sweatshirt, and opened my laptop again. This time I didn't search for advice. I searched for answers, solutions. Lawyers who specialized in mortgage fraud articles about suing family members. Steps to remove your name from a fraudulent loan. The world felt colder, sharper. But for the first time in a long time, I felt awake. I stayed up late into the night, reading, taking notes, mapping out everything. If they had expected me to roll over and cry about it, they didn't know me at all. I wasn't going to scream. I wasn't going to throw fits or demand apologies. That would never come. I was going to be smarter, quieter, deadlier. I thought about every moment they had made me feel small. Mom brushing off my college acceptance with a distracted, "That's nice, honey." Dad laughing when I told them about the promotion I earned without anyone's help. Jessica sneering, "Not everyone's perfect like you." I wasn't perfect. I had just been surviving, carrying the weight they tossed aside without a second thought. And now I would carry my own weight, and I would watch them crumble under the one they tried to pin on me. I shut down the laptop and took a seat back as the clock struck 2 in the morning, fatigue keeping watch over me. However, it wasn't the depressing fatigue I had previously experienced. This time, it was the somber silence of a decision maker. I would set myself free. I would safeguard my future. And it would be too late by the time they realized what I had done. There are some free lessons. There are some lessons that are absolutely necessary. The difference was about to be revealed to them. I woke up the following morning feeling more clear-headed than I had in years. Strangely, once betrayal was fully realized, it could sharpen rather than break the mind. I informed my boss that I needed a personal day and called in sick. She made no inquiries. A quiet finality that didn't lend itself to small talk is what I believe she heard in my voice. I started by going to a nearby coffee shop, not far from the city center. Tucked away between a florist and a bookshop, it was a quiet place where secrets could be shared without anyone paying attention. I waited for my appointment at precisely 9 in the morning while sipping a bitter black coffee at a corner table. He showed up. A friend suggested Mr. Warner, a real estate lawyer, someone with a reputation for discretion and, when needed, brutality. He was older, more perceptive, and exuded the no-nonsense energy of someone who had witnessed too many unpleasant family conflicts to handle one more. I gave him the documents I had collected, including my credit report, demonstrating the hit my score had taken, the mortgage papers with my name emblazoned on them, and the bank's letters requesting payments. Mr. Warner's brows furrowed as he systematically flipped through the stack. After he was done, he put the papers down and gave me a steady look. "I take it you know what this means?" he inquired. I gave a nod. They were dishonest. Theft of identity. In theory, it is illegal. It was simultaneously like a bomb and a punch to hear those words spoken aloud. Identity theft and fraud. Not just drama in the family, not merely a miscommunication, offenses. I didn't get angry or cry. I simply leaned closer and asked the most important question: how can I make it better? Mr. Warner explained the plan over the course of the next 2 hours. Submit a police report. Give written notice to the bank, formally contesting the loan. Start the process of legally removing my name. If necessary, file a lawsuit for damages. It wouldn't go quickly, it would be difficult. And any shaky bonds I still have with my family would be completely destroyed. It would save my future, though. I became aware of something significant as I listened and took thorough notes. This was not what I was doing to them. I did this for myself. They had already made their decisions. I was simply making a different decision now. Mr. Warner gave me a firm handshake at the conclusion of the meeting. He said, "Emily, you're doing the right thing. Don't allow your guilt to weaken you." After putting his card in my wallet, I walked out of the cafe, stepping out into the harsh, dazzling sunlight. Life went on. People chuckled. Automobiles sounded. On the sidewalk, a mother gave her child a tender reprimand. As I stood there, I understood that my life could go on, not with them. It wouldn't be easy, but it would be mine. And that was sufficient for the first time. There was a slight smell of old coffee and something metallic, like old filing cabinets, coming from the police station. As I told the officer that I needed to report identity theft, I stood at the counter feeling strangely detached. I gave him the thick file when he asked for the specifics. I had gathered documents, timelines, copies of my identification, and the fraudulent loan papers with the assistance of Mr. Warner. As the officer flipped through them, something flickered across his face, and I saw it. Acknowledgement, incredulity, and perhaps even a tiny glimmer of rage on my part. "You sure you want to move forward with this?" he asked quietly, glancing up at me. "If I don't," I said evenly, "they'll keep taking for me." He nodded, stamped the papers, and handed me a copy of the report. It was official now. From there, the dominoes began to fall faster than I had even dared hope. I mailed the certified letter to the bank that same afternoon, attaching the police report, and a formal dispute notice. I remember standing at the post office counter, the pen trembling slightly in my hand, as I signed the last form. Not from fear from the weight of finality. There would be no taking this back. The next few days passed in a tense, eerie silence. I didn't call my parents. I didn't call Jessica. I didn't warn them. Instead, I waited. 3 days later, my mother showed up unannounced at my doorstep. I watched her from the window before opening the door. She looked disheveled, furious, and beneath it all terrified. When I finally opened it, I didn't invite her inside. She launched into it without even a greeting. "How dare you involve the police? Do you know what you've done to this family?" I listened quietly, letting her words bounce off me like rubber bullets. "I trusted you to be understanding," she hissed. Jessica needed help. Family sticks together. I tilted my head slightly, studying her. "No," I said softly. "Family asks. They don't steal." Her face reddened, her mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. "You've ruined everything," she cried. I almost laughed, but I didn't. Rather, I spoke at a level tone. My words are like velvet-wrapped knives. Nothing was ruined by me. I simply quit tidying up your mess. I shut the door without saying anything more. I had never produced a sound so strong. The latch caught with a gentle click. My heart was racing as I stood on the other side, but from release, not regret. Jessica attempted to call me after I had missed 12 calls later that evening, a series of irate, desperate voicemails. I didn't listen and erased them. In a week, the bank replied. They formally apologized for their part in the ordeal and suspended the loan while the investigation was ongoing. Even though I had taken the first correct steps, the legal process would still take months, as well as my family. At last, their world, which was based on deception and entitlement, was beginning to fall apart. I didn't need to yell. I was spared the fight. I just needed to remain motionless while the truth worked, and for some reason, it was much sweeter. During the ensuing weeks, around me, the silence grew thick. No more unexpected visits, frantic phone calls, or guilt-ridden texts from family members urging me to forget and forgive. It seemed as though I had been removed from their well-maintained picture of unity, from the family group chat, and from their holiday plans. The loneliness was oppressive at first. A part of you, the child still yearning for approval, aches when the bonds are finally broken, even if the betrayal is deep. But gradually, another thing began to grow inside of me, authentic peace. I started doing things that I had not done for years. I bought sunflowers for my kitchen table and wandered through farmers markets on Saturdays. I began going on hikes on nearby trails, inhaling the refreshing morning air and sensing the stability of the ground beneath my feet. I impulsively signed up for a pottery class. Every time I shaped something new out of the raw clay, my spirit seemed to lighten despite my clumsy hands. Rebuilding had a certain beauty to it. Piece by fragile piece, quietly, without a fuss or pretension. In the background, the court case went on. I signed affidavits, answered Mr. Warner's emails, gathered loan updates, and slowed down the unwinding process. Every time I came across a formal letter bearing my name. "This is my name," Emily Parker reminded me. "I own this life. Not a present from my folks. I have no duty to my sister. Mine." Realizing that I secretly didn't want retribution was the most peculiar aspect, the way I used to believe I would. Jessica losing everything was something I didn't want to happen. I didn't want my parents to be humiliated in public. All I wanted was some distance, liberty, an opportunity to live free of the unseen burden of debt that I never consented to. A few months after it all started one evening, I sat with a cup of tea on the balcony of my tiny apartment and watched the city lights come to life. The girl was on my mind. I had been the one who repeatedly said yes out of fear and continued to take every hit as if it were her responsibility. And I considered the woman I was growing into, in a way that no shouting match could ever match. They were quiet, steady, and unbreakable. The edge of the old throw blanket that was draped over my shoulders was lifted by a gentle breeze. I whispered the words, grinning into the darkness. For a lifetime, I had waited to believe. I owe them nothing. Not resentment, not justifications, not even pardon on their timeline. Nothing but quiet. And I at last discovered who I was in that silence. The last altercation was quiet. It wasn't a heartfelt apology or a yelling match. There was nothing dramatic about it. Nearly a year after it all began, it took place on a calm Sunday afternoon. I had just returned from a pottery fair with bowls and mugs that I had made myself. My parents and Jessica were standing clumsily outside my apartment building when I saw them. Somehow, they appeared smaller. Jessica's once flawless hair was disheveled, and her anxious eyes were darting all over the place. My father, who used to yell that family was about loyalty, was unable to look me in the eye, and my mother was holding her purse so tightly that her knuckles were white. They were losing everything. The investigation by the bank had set off a series of events. Jessica's loan was in arrears. Their meticulously constructed illusion of control vanished along with the foreclosure of the home she was so proud of. We were surrounded by long shadows from the late afternoon sun when I stopped on the sidewalk. For the first time in my life, they didn't give me orders or insist on explanations, so they must have noticed the change in me. They begged. "Emily!" With a shaky voice, my mother started. "We were wrong. We are still family, though." Jessica moved forward, her voice desperate and thin. "I need your assistance, only for a short time. We ask that you not abandon us." My anger had vanished from me. "Don't burn. You must strike out or cause them pain." Just a quiet, profound certainty. I slowly put my bags down and straightened up. I took a close look at each of their faces, filled with regret, fear, and the knowledge that I was no longer theirs. It wasn't because they loved me that they had come. They had come to get something from me once more, and there wouldn't be anything to take this time. "I hope that one day you will understand what true family means," I said in a steady, clear voice. "However, you can't demand it when it's convenient or steal it or fake it." I felt the tangible weight of my bags as I picked them up once more. I added in a low voice that I'm at last free and won't be returning. They scowled. My mother's protesting mouth opens. Tears were streaming from Jessica's eyes. I didn't wait to hear their next words, though. I turned past them and didn't turn around again. I stopped briefly as I got to the stairs leading to my apartment. My hair is being ruffled by the afternoon breeze. I muttered to myself, not to them. Sometimes the loudest thing you'll ever say is to leave. Then, putting everything that had previously broken me behind me, I ascended the stairs one step at a time. A life that was at last exquisitely mine. Story 5. At 12, my parents abandoned me to a beach life and placed me in foster care. They were pleading with me for aid at the age of 23. As a result, I expelled them from my graduation celebration. I'm 24 years old and go by Noah. However, this story started when I was 12 years old. At the time, my family seemed to me to be very typical or average. Although we were not wealthy, we appeared to be doing well and had a respectable home and wardrobe. My parents, Diane and Russell, pretended everything was fine, until it was that is. Then there was Lily, my sister. The golden child was Lily. You are aware of the kind. Teachers loved her. Her parents were raving about her nonstop. If she really did sneeze, it was regarded as a masterpiece. Me, I was only Noah. It wasn't that I was a bad kid, but everything I did was just background noise. Lily received the fridge space for her drawings while I got a slap on the back, and that's nice. Noah. And the truth is, I didn't resent Lily for it. It wasn't her fault. They treated her like a trophy, and me as if I didn't exist, but it made me feel unimportant. Anyway, the day everything came apart began very routinely. I was in my room playing with some old action figures that I hadn't completely outgrown yet, but Diane then summoned me downstairs. And that strange voice parents use when they're trying to appear calm. But you can tell something's up. I figured I had left the milk out or forgotten to do a task. When I walked into the living room, Russell and Diane were both sitting on the couch looking far too serious to be discussing milk. "Sit down," Noah Russell instructed, motioning to the chair across from them. His tone was tight, as if this were a meeting rather than a family talk. But Diane, on the other hand, was doing her best to be empathetic. But something felt odd. I sat down confused. Diane took a big breath and stated, "Noah, we need to talk about something important." My immediate reaction was that somebody had died. Perhaps it was a grandfather I scarcely knew. But then Russell stated, "We've had some financial difficulties and can't afford to take care of you anymore." At first, I assumed I had misheard him. "What do you mean, can't afford to take care of me? Am I some kind of subscription you're canceling?" I just gazed at them, trying to absorb what he'd said, but Diane kept going. "It's not your fault, sweetie. This is something we've been struggling with for a while, and we had to make a really hard decision. A difficult decision, right?" They made it sound as if they were considering which cable package to keep, not whether or not to abandon their child. I inquired what they meant, hoping it wasn't what it sounded like. Diane stated that they had found me a foster home, but it was just temporary. She continued uttering that word as if it was meant to make me feel better. "Why can't Lily go to the foster home?" I said I was desperate to comprehend. Diane's face grew chilly for a short second before she said, "Lily's in school." "Noah, she needs stability. As if I didn't. Russell interjected before I could say anything else. "This isn't about choosing one of you over the other. It's about what makes the most sense right now." I started crying, and it wasn't the silent type. It was ugly, full-fledged crying. Because how else would a 12-year-old react when told his parents are giving up on him? Diane attempted to hug me, but I pulled her away. "Why are you doing this?" I asked again. But all they did was regurgitate the same rehearsed phrases about difficult decisions and financial troubles. The following day, they prepared a tiny bag for me and drove me to the foster home. The ride there was quiet. Not the kind of quiet where people are deep in concentration, but the kind where the tension is palpable in every breath. I continued staring at them, expecting that one of them would glance back at me and say, "This is a mistake. You're returning home." But they didn't. When we arrived at the house, I waited in the car for a bit, thinking they changed their minds. Russell turned around and said, "Come on, Noah, let's get this over with." As if it were a duty, he merely wanted to mark off his list. I got out of the car, clutching the duffel bag they had packed for me. The foster parents, Mr. and Mrs. Bennett, were standing at the entrance. They appeared pleasant, but I scarcely noticed them. All I could think of was that my parents were ready to leave me there. Diane knelt in front of me and said, "We love you, Noah. This isn't goodbye forever. Just give it some time, okay?" She kissed my forehead, but it didn't seem reassuring. It felt as if someone had stamped a return label on me. Russell shook my hand. Neither a hug nor a handshake, like I was a distant cousin. He hardly knew. Then they were gone. I stood on the porch watching their car disappear down the street, my chest feeling heavier by the second. I kept thinking they'll be back. They need to come back. However, they didn't. That night, I kept repeating the day in my mind. What did I do wrong? Was I not good enough? Why Lily, not me? Those questions stayed with me for weeks. The worst part was that I had no answers. All I had was their word that this would be transitory. Even though I wanted to believe it, I had a nagging feeling that I'd never see them again. Looking back, I understood that was when everything changed. It wasn't simply about their departure. It was about how they left. As if I were a burden. They were relieved to get rid of. But at 12, I didn't have the words to process it. All I knew was that my parents had driven away, and I was alone. Over the next 3 days, the Bennetts attempted to make me feel at ease. Mrs. Bennett prepared pancakes for breakfast every morning. Mr. Bennett would occasionally enter my room and ask me random trivia questions. Despite their attempts, I was not ready to trust them or anybody else. My parents had promised me that this was just temporary, so I clung to it like a lifeline. I kept telling myself that they would call, explain everything, and I'd be home before I knew it. But days slipped into weeks, weeks into years, and they said nothing. It wasn't until I returned to school that I realized how serious my position was. Kids at school noticed I was new and asked me a variety of questions. "Where are you from? Why did you relocate here?" I didn't have enough energy to explain the reality, so I made up vague replies like, "Oh, my parents are working in another state for a while." Just saying those words made my lips bitter. One afternoon after school, I sat in the Bennett's living room, scrolling through my phone while avoiding schoolwork. That's when I made the mistake of searching for my parents online. I wasn't sure what I was looking for, maybe just an indication that they were still thinking about me. What I discovered instead knocked the wind out of me. They were smiling on a beach with the ocean behind them, appearing happier than I had ever seen them. The caption accompanying the photo said, "Finally living our dream life." As I looked through their photos, my stomach turned pictures of exotic holidays, expensive dinners, and of course, Lily. She appeared in almost every shot, usually front and center, with comments like, "Our amazing daughter." It was as if I did not exist. The longer I scrolled, the angrier I became. They said they couldn't afford to keep me, but here they were living like influencers, and Lily was not in foster care like me. She was still among them, smiling at the camera as if everything was fine. I felt as if my head was spinning. They hadn't simply abandoned me, they had obliterated me. What struck me the most was not simply the images, it was a travel blog. Yep, they had a blog where they documented their path to freedom. They wrote about how letting go of worldly stuff or myself had given them insight. I went down to the comments, but this time something stuck out. There was a comment from an account without a profile photo. It was written, "Must be nice running away and leaving everything behind. Hope it doesn't catch up to you." I frowned. The comments felt cutting, as if they were meant to cut through whatever shiny picture Russell and Diane were attempting to present. My thoughts raced. What did the commenter mean by leaving everything behind? Were they discussing me or something else entirely? I clicked on the comment, but the account was private, and their profile image was simply a blank gray circle. I continued to browse down the page, hoping for more. In another photo of Diane enjoying a tropical drink, someone wrote, "Guess skipping town was worth it after all." My chest clenched as I focused on the words "leaving town." Why would somebody say that? I read through more comments, but nothing was as pointed as those two. Most people congratulated them and expressed how inspiring their lifestyle was. I wanted to shout at those folks for not seeing beyond the facade. I could not let it go. Are those comments from random trolls, or do they know something I don't? Russell and Diane were used to lying. They had informed me that they couldn't afford to care for me, but this was clearly not true. Was there more to it? I couldn't quit thinking about the questions, but what could I do? I didn't have access to their history or secrets. All I could do was stew on those mysterious words, wondering what else they were hiding. I closed my laptop, my hands trembling. It was more than just the lies they told me. It was about how they didn't even feel sorry they were out there living their best lives while I was here, trying to figure out how to live without them. That night at dinner, the Bennett sensed something was wrong. I wasn't very covert about my mood. "Are you okay, Noah?" Mr. Bennett said, setting down his fork. "Yeah," I murmured, unwilling to get into it. But Mrs. Bennett was not the sort to take things lightly. "You don't have to tell us if you're not ready. But if something's bothering you, we're here," she replied softly. I glanced at them. These individuals who hardly knew me, but seemed to care more than my own parents had. For some reason, I broke. I told them everything, the blog, the photos, and the captions. I anticipated them to tell me to stop looking, or that it wasn't important. But they didn't. Mrs. Bennett simply listened. Her eyes filled with the quiet sympathy I was still adjusting to. Mr. Bennett, however, appeared enraged. "You have every right to be angry," he stated, leaning forward. "What they did to you, that's not on you. That's on them. And don't let anyone make you think otherwise." It wasn't a big speech, but it hit me for the first time. Someone admitted that what had transpired was not my fault. Over the next 2 weeks, I became more accustomed to life with the Bennetts. They were not flawless, but they were consistent. They inquired about my day, assisted me with my homework, and encouraged me to try new activities. I even started to open up at school, joining a few groups and meeting friends. But my resentment of my parents persisted. If anything, it expanded. But I knew one thing: I would not let their decision define me. So I started joining school clubs. Not because I suddenly wanted to be the most social kid on the planet, but because I needed to keep myself busy. I joined the debate team first. I figured I was used to debating thanks to Russell and Diane, so why not put it to use? It turns out that I was pretty excellent at it. Then I took a part-time job. Mr. Bennett had been hinting for weeks that I may like to spend some money, so I relented and applied at a neighborhood bookstore. It wasn't flashy, but I liked being surrounded by books and people who are willing to talk about them. Furthermore, it provided me with a small taste of independence. Every payment seemed like a step toward a future that was uniquely mine. Somewhere along the way, I met Marco. Marco treated me like a regular child, not a charity case. When I told him about my parents, he merely nodded and said, "That's messed up, man. Want to play video games." When I got home from school one afternoon, I noticed that the house was unusually quiet. Mrs. Bennet would usually be in the kitchen, humming along to an oldies song, while Mr. Bennet worked on something in the garage. However, this time, I heard hushed conversations coming from the dining room. I paused in the corridor just out of sight, straining to listen. "Should we tell him?" said Mrs. Bennet, her voice low and hesitant. "He has the right to know," Mr. Bennet responded. "If it's about him, we can't keep it a secret. It'll just upset him. He's doing so well right now," she told me. I stepped closer. "What exactly were they talking about?" "We should at least wait until we know more," Mrs. Bennet said. "This letter doesn't explain much. It could be nothing." I leaned against the wall, my heart racing. Is this a letter about me? Before I could figure out how to inquire without sounding like I was eavesdropping. Mr. Bennet groaned. "Fine, we'll wait. But if they contact us again, we have to come clean." I heard footsteps approaching the living room and quickly ducked into the kitchen, claiming I had just walked in. Mrs. Bennet smiled at me, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. Later that night, when everyone was asleep, I sneaked into the dining room. I knew I shouldn't spy, but I couldn't stop myself. On the table was a stack of mail, and near the bottom, I noticed an envelope with my name on it. I hesitated to pick it up. The return address was from a law firm. As I opened it and read the first few lines, my stomach churned. "To whom it may concern. This is a notice regarding unresolved debts associated with Gregory and Diane. As Noah's guardians, we require all pertinent documents addressing the family's financial status during—" I paused reading, my hands trembling. Debts. Was this what Russell and Diane had been running from? Had they dismissed me? Not because they couldn't afford me, but because they couldn't accept their own mistakes. I tucked the letter back into the envelope and returned it to the stack, attempting to make it appear that I had not touched it. My thoughts raced. I wasn't sure what to do with this information, but one thing was clear. Russell and Diane had been lying about more than just their financial problems. By the age of 16, things began to make sense. I'd been working hard in school, juggling my job and extracurricular activities, and it was paying off. My grades were strong, and my debate coach told me I had a good chance of receiving a scholarship. That was the first time I allowed myself to picture a future that did not include my parents or their problems. It felt freeing, actually. The scholarship became a reality. I still recall the day I received the letter. I applied on a whim, believing there was little chance I'd get it. When I opened the package and saw the words "full ride," I could not believe it. I dashed downstairs to show the Bennets, who were literally beaming with delight. Mrs. Bennet grabbed me tightly, and Mr. Bennet repeatedly said I knew it. "I knew you could do it." That night, I decided to post the news on social media. I wasn't usually one to disclose personal information, but this seemed like a time worth celebrating. I wrote something short and sweet about how hard effort pays off and how grateful I was for the help I had received. The remarks started coming in almost immediately. Friends from school teachers and even random classmates that I hardly knew. However, there was one comment that made my stomach drop. It came from Diane. "We're so proud of you, Noah. Let's reconnect soon." Proud of myself. After everything, I stared at the comment for what felt like an eternity, my rage rising to the surface again. They didn't just make a comment. It was so casual, as if we were distant relatives who had lost touch rather than parents who had entirely abandoned their son. I did not respond. What could I possibly say? Instead, I deleted their comments and blocked them both. That's when I understood I didn't need their approval or guilt trips. The scholarship gave me a renewed feeling of purpose. I poured myself even deeper into my studies, determined to prove to myself, and perhaps to them, that I could succeed without their assistance. Mr. Bennet began teaching me little financial literacy lessons, which I found interesting. He showed me how to save budget and set long-term goals. It wasn't flashy, but it was practical and offered me a sense of power that I hadn't experienced before. With their support, I began instructing younger pupils after school. It was not something I had ever imagined myself doing, but it turned out I had a talent for describing things in a way that made sense. Plus, it felt wonderful to aid suffering kids, especially since I knew what it was like to be left behind. One day during one of our tutoring sessions, Marco inquired about my ultimate aim. Like, where do you see yourself in 5 years? He asked, reclining back in his chair, as if it were the most simple question in the world. I paused for a second before responding. I just want to be stable, like have my own place, my own life, and not feel like I'm relying on anyone else. That's solid, he remarked, grinning. But don't forget to have some fun along the way. Marco's remarks stayed with me. I realized I had been so focused on proving myself that I had left little room for anything else. So I promised myself I'd find a balance. I kept working hard, but I also began saying yes to things I normally avoided: game nights with friends, unplanned road vacations, or simply hanging out at the park on a quiet Sunday. It wasn't much, but it reminded me that life doesn't have to be all work and no play. By the end of the year, I felt like a new person. I wasn't simply surviving anymore. I was prospering. The Bennetts had become my rock. Marco was like a brother to me, and it seemed like I was finally on my own road. My parents' absence still hurts, but it didn't define me. If anything, it motivated me to continue moving forward. Then everything changed when my graduation day arrived. It was meant to be the pinnacle of everything I had worked for. It was the day I would finally step up, surrounded by everyone who had supported me, and proclaim I made it. The weeks before graduation were a haze. I had scarcely any time to think. The Bennetts were ecstatic, planning a modest celebration at their home following. Even Marco, who usually dismisses anything mushy, looked genuinely excited for me. I recall the morning of graduation like it was yesterday. My mind raced with memories of everything it had taken to get here. From the minute my parents dropped me off on the Bennett's doorstep to the evenings I spent studying, simply to prove to myself I could do it. I thought about everything. Mrs. Bennett had ironed my graduation gown the night before and left it on my bedroom door with a letter that said, "So proud of you, Noah." I grinned when I noticed it. It wasn't just the note, it was everything they'd done for me in the previous 5 years. They were no longer merely foster parents. They were my actual family. The ceremony was just as you'd anticipate. When my name was called, I crossed the stage to receive my diploma, and for a brief minute, it seemed like time had stopped. The crowd was cheering, and I could hear the Bennetts and Marco calling out my name like I was a rock star. It was just what I had hoped for. But of course, nothing in my life remains great for long. Following the ceremony, we gathered outdoors to snap photographs. The Bennetts were grinning, and Marco was cracking foolish comments about how my diploma was probably scribbled in crayons. Lily had even shown up, which surprised me, because she normally kept to herself. My world seemed perfect until I saw them. Russell and Diane stood at the fringe of the crowd. At first, I assumed my eyes were playing tricks on me. I hadn't seen them in years, and I certainly hadn't invited them. But there they were, dressed like they'd just gotten off a cruise ship, surveying the crowd, as if looking for something or someone. I attempted to ignore them, expecting they would leave once they realized I was not going to address them. But Russell caught my eye, and before I could look away, he began marching toward me, bringing Diane along with him. My chest constricted as they approached, their features painted with phony smiles. "Noah!" Diane remarked, her tone far too upbeat for someone who had abandoned their child. "You look so grown up." Russell clasped my shoulder, as if we were old friends catching up. "We're so proud of you, son. This is such a big day for all of us." "All of us!" I laughed at the arrogance of that assertion. I stared at them, unsure whether to shout, cry, or walk away. The Bennetts and Marco were standing a few steps away, evidently perplexed but unwilling to intervene. "What are you doing here?" I questioned, my voice firm, despite my quivering palms. "We came to celebrate with you," Russell explained, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. "We've made mistakes, Noah, but we always wanted the best for you." Diane added, her voice dripping with fake sincerity. "We've missed you so much. We thought this would be the perfect time to reconnect as a family." "You don't get to call yourselves my family," I told you. "You abandoned me. You left me with strangers and didn't even bother to check if I was okay. And now you want to show up like none of that happened." Diane's smile faded, and Russell's face grew red. "That's not fair, Noah," Russell responded calmly. "We did what we thought was best for everyone." "Best for everyone," I countered. You mean best for you? Don't stand here and act like you did this for me. You were living your dream life while I was trying to figure out how to survive without you. People were starting to take notice. The Bennetts moved closer, their expressions a mix of concern and rage. Lily surprised me the most. She stepped over to Russell and Diane and told them, "You don't get to ruin this for him. You've done enough." It was the first time I'd seen her stand up to them, and I couldn't have been more proud. Russell attempted to protest, but Diane tugged on his sleeve, muttering about generating a scene. They both gave me one more glance, their faces filled with frustration and pity before turning to walk away. The Bennetts were quick to step in, hugging me and reminding me that today was about my accomplishments, not their turmoil. Marco offered me a tissue and mumbled something about how I should charge them for emotional damages, which made me chuckle. The remainder of the day was a blur. We returned to the Bennett's house, where they had adorned the backyard with streamers and balloons. And for a few hours, I forgot about Russell and Diane, and simply enjoyed being around those who genuinely cared. That night, after everyone had gone to bed, I sat on the porch with Lily. She turned to me and said, "I'm sorry for everything. I didn't see it before, but you were right. They manipulated us. They only care about themselves." I didn't know what to say, so I simply nodded. We sat there silently for a bit. I felt Lily and I were on the same page, and that was plenty. That day wasn't just about graduating. It was about finally standing up for myself and cutting links with those who had attempted to bring me down. It was not easy, but it was necessary. But I knew my folks were not finished yet. Their unexpected contact with me, as well as their insistence on returning to my life after all these years, gave me the impression that something was wrong, and I couldn't be more correct. A week after graduation, Diane sent me an email. At first, I assumed it was an apology, but deep inside I knew better. It was lengthy, full of half-truths and justifications. She talked about how difficult things had been for them, how they made mistakes, but always had my best interests in mind. She then said to me, "We hope we can move past this and reconnect as a family. You're doing so well, and we're proud of you. Maybe you could help us out during this tough time." Help them out after everything they'd done, or more properly not done. They had the audacity to beg for my assistance. It was humorous in an unfunny sense. I did not respond. I deleted the email and blocked their address, but the rage persisted like an unwelcome visitor. Lily had been keeping an eye on them more out of curiosity than anything. She updated me on their newest shenanigans. They had spent their funds attempting to maintain the image of their so-called dream life, which they couldn't afford. The travel blog had failed, leaving them with nothing except debt and poor credit. They had sold the majority of their stuff and were couch surfing with distant relatives who, according to Lily, were losing patience with them. "They're a mess," Lily commented one night while on the phone. "But they keep blaming you for everything. They believed that if you simply forgive them, everything would automatically improve." "Forgive them? For what?" "Making me homeless at 12, I snapped, bitterness evident in my voice. Lily sighed. "I'm not saying they are correct, Noah. I'm only telling you what they are saying. Their downfall was not something I cheered for, but I couldn't say I felt sorry for them either. They'd made their decisions, and now they were coping with the consequences. Meanwhile, my life was progressing. One afternoon, I received a notification on my phone that left me dumbfounded. Russell and Diane had found me on LinkedIn. They'd commented on a post I'd written about my future scholarship, saying, "We're so proud of you, Noah. Let's catch up soon." It was almost identical to the comment they had made on my graduation post. I had no idea they knew how LinkedIn operated. I instantly blocked them, but that wasn't enough. They started messaging people in my network, including coworkers, professors, and the Bennetts. The texts were all the same. A combination of guilt-tripping and plain lies about how I had abandoned them. One of the messages got to my employer at the bookshop, who called me aside one day to inquire what was going on. "Look, I don't want to pry," she explained, "but someone pretending to be your parents sent us an email." It was weird. I felt humiliated. "I'm very sorry," I said. "They are not actually a part of my life. I'll handle it." To her credit, my employer did not press me for information. She simply nodded and added, "Well, if they bother us again, let me know. We have your back." Hearing that was reassuring, but it also showed me how far Russell and Diane were willing to go. They were not only invading my personal life, but also attempting to undermine my professional one. Around this time, Lily stepped in, issuing a public statement on social media and calling them out. She didn't hold back, telling us how they abandoned both of us and refused to accept responsibility for their actions. Noah and I have fought hard to rebuild our lives without their help, she wrote. We do not owe them anything. Her post went viral, and hundreds of others commented in support. While it was encouraging to have so many strangers supporting us, it also exacerbated the issue. Russell and Diane began striking out, writing their own dramatic rants about how ungrateful we were and how much they had done for us. Their messages were full of half-truths and plain lies, but as they spoke, more people saw through them. Then Lily called me, her voice strangely enthusiastic. Do you recall the old storage unit they had? It turns out they stopped paying for it, and the landlord allowed me to take a few items before emptying it out. An hour later, she arrived at my house carrying a damaged cardboard box. You need to see this, she replied, dropping it on the table. Inside, I discovered a folder full of documentation, unpaid invoices, foreclosure notifications, and letters from collection agencies. My stomach dropped as I flipped through them. They were living way beyond their means, Lily stated coldly. Failed enterprises and maxed out credit cards. It appears that they fled rather than face the situation near the bottom of the stack. A letter from their lawyer drew my attention. It mentioned reforming finances and lowering reliance to cut costs. My name was right there, classified as a liability. I slammed the folder closed, my hands trembling. They didn't leave because they couldn't afford me. I admitted quietly, but they left because it was easier than cleaning up their mess. Lily paused for a time before responding. I thought you deserved to know. Thanks, I mumbled. After she departed, I glanced at the folder, torn between destroying it and preserving it as evidence. I ended up keeping it for myself rather than for them. By the time I started college, their reputation had deteriorated. People reported their crowdfunding projects as bogus, and even the family they were residing with had kicked them out. According to Lily, they were living out of their car and still believed I owed the money. Meanwhile, I was thriving. College was all I dreamed for, and I was determined to make the most of my scholarship. I have created a modest side business offering financial literacy classes on campus. It wasn't spectacular, but it felt nice to give back, especially given how much the Bennetts had taught me about money management. One day during my second semester, I received a call from Lily. You're not going to believe this, she replied, her tone alternately frustrated and disbelieving. They showed up at my apartment. What I asked as my chest tightened. They were crying, Noah, begging me to convince you to talk to them. They said they're desperate. I sighed and rubbed my temples. What did you say? I told them to leave. I said if they showed up again, I'd call the police. I wasn't sure whether to be angry or relieved. Part of me resented that they were still attempting to draw Lily into their turmoil. But a part of me was proud of her for staying firm. She had come a long way from the timid girl who avoided confrontation at all costs. I did not owe them my forgiveness money or time. I owed myself to continue living the life I want, free of their influence. But of course, Russell and Diane were not finished with me. They were not the type of folks who let go, especially not when they believed there was anything in it for them. It began with strange numbers appearing on my phone at all times of day. I normally ignored them, but one day I made the mistake of responding. It was my Aunt Rachel, a relative I hadn't spoken with in years. She did not waste any time. Noah, what is wrong with you? She demanded, before I could even say hello. Excuse me, I asked, caught off guard. Your parents are struggling, living in their car, and you're just ignoring them like they don't exist. They're your family, Noah. You owe them at least a little kindness. I held down the temptation to chuckle. Kindness? Did they treat me kindly when they dropped me off at a foster home and never looked back? Were they kind to me when they left me to fend for myself at 12? Rachel huffed, obviously not expecting me to push back. They were doing what they thought was best. People make mistakes, Noah. You're being heartless. I hung up. I didn't want to waste my time justifying myself to someone who clearly had no understanding of what I'd been through, or worse, didn't care. Over the next few weeks, I received similar calls from distant cousins, the majority of whom had not contacted me in years. It was the same story every time. I was the ungrateful son, the selfish one who couldn't forgive his unfortunate parents. None of them appeared to realize that Russell and Diane weren't only bad parents. They were toxic, manipulative, and reluctant to accept responsibility for their acts. Helping them would just draw me back into the chaos from which I had fought so hard to escape. When the calls failed, Russell and Diane escalated the situation. One day I received an email from a lawyer representing them. The subject line itself made my stomach turn. Notice of intent to pursue financial support. I opened it and skimmed the legal jargon, which boiled down to the following. They were suing me for financial abandonment. According to the email, they believed I had an obligation to support them now that I had achieved success. It was hilarious. First of all, I was not a millionaire. Sure, I was doing well, but I was still in the beginning stages of my profession. Second, I had been in foster care. Legally, I owed them nothing. I emailed the email to a lawyer the Bennetts had recommended, who told me it was a bogus threat. They don't have a case, she explained. They're trying to scare you into giving them money. Don't engage. It was sound counsel, but it left an unpleasant taste in my mouth. After everything they'd done, the thought of them twisting the story to make me the bad guy stung even more. Instead of stewing about it, I focused my energies on my task. By now, my financial literacy classes had evolved into something far larger. What began as a side venture has grown into a full-fledged organization that teaches young adults around the country how to handle their money and plan for their future. I've worked with nonprofit schools and even some well-known enterprises. Every accomplishment felt like a step forward from the person I was before Russell and Diane left me behind. I recently received an email from a producer who learned about my story through one of my nonprofit partners. They were creating a series about resilience and wanted to include me. Initially, I was apprehensive. Did I really want to put my tale out there for everyone to see? But after discussing it with the Bennetts and Lily, I decided to go for it. If sharing my story might make even one child in foster care feel less alone, it would be worthwhile. The filming procedure was strange. They asked whether I wanted to mention anything about Russell and Diane. I deliberated for a long time before deciding to discuss them briefly. Not to shame them, but to provide context for my path. They made their choices, I explained during one of the interviews, and those choices shaped me in ways I never expected. But they don't define me, my life now, the family I built, the work I do. That's what matters. But during one of the filming breaks, the producer approached me appearing hesitant. "Hey, Noah," she began. "We found something during our research. It's about your parents. Are you okay hearing it?" I raised an eyebrow. At this point, I'm not sure anything could shock me, but go ahead. She took a big breath before proceeding. They were evicted after defaulting on many loans. There is also a history of delinquent debts which could lead to potentially fraudulent claims. It looks like they skipped town to avoid legal trouble. I stared at her. Fraud allegations. The words seemed heavy, as if they were sinking in slow motion. She nodded. It wasn't anything huge. At least, not on the surface. But there was a pattern of failed business ideas, questionable credit card usage, and attempts to obtain loans they couldn't afford. They left many people hanging. The fury I thought I had buried resurfaced, so they weren't simply greedy. They were intentionally defrauding people and fleeing when the consequences became apparent. The producer offered me a compassionate glance. "It appears that way. I felt you should know in case it came up again." I nodded. Even though my thoughts were racing, their lies had always seemed personal, as if they were solely about me. But knowing they had left a trail of ruin made things worse. Everything about them proved what I'd believed all along. They abandoned me because it was convenient a way to cut their losses and start again. However, when the documentary was released, the response was enormous. Messages came in from people who had grown up in similar situations, thanking me for telling my tale. Some claimed it gave them hope. Others simply claimed it made them feel seen. It was unexpectedly humiliating. Russell and Diane attempted to take advantage of the documentary, as one could expect. They went on social media and posted big, dramatic rants about how I had portrayed them as villains when they were the true victims. It did not work. If anything, it backfired. People who watched the documentary began calling them out, pointing out flaws in their tales and questioning their motivations. Their efforts to recover compassion merely reinforced their reputation as manipulative and selfish. Meanwhile, I purchased my first home, a modest space in a quiet area where I could finally feel like I belonged. I invited the Bennetts and Lily over for a housewarming meal, and we spent the evening laughing, eating too much, and reflecting on how far we had come. Lily had also been prospering. She had graduated from college and was embarking on her own career free of Russell and Diane's influence. To be honest, I have no regrets about the decisions I took. Cutting ties with Russell and Diane was difficult, but it was necessary. My success was thanks to the Bennett's Lily and the family I formed. Not blood, but the people that turned up. And that is all that matters. At the end of the day, family is not defined by blood. It's about who shows up, who stays, and who encourages you to be the best version of yourself. And the family I chose